Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm Jack Gillis, Executive Director of the Consumer Federation of America, and absolutely thrilled today to join my colleagues from America Saves and this unique and very special America Saves Summit. Never before has it been more important to embark on what we consider to be one of the most important jobs in America, dramatically increasing the saving rates of the American public. It was about 20 years ago when the Consumer Federation launched America Saves during a classic Cleveland, Ohio blizzard. But as that frigid weather did nothing to dampen the passion of the 200 people gathered to address the challenge of savings, neither has this challenging pandemic diminished the efforts of the America Saves team and the many supporters who have made this event possible. For over 50 years, as the nation's largest federation of consumer-centric organizations, CFA and its over 250 national, state, and local groups have represented the consumer in congressional, regulatory, and public policy forums. And the America Saves effort to financially educate those Americans who have the least access to our financial systems is something we are very proud of. I want to especially thank our amazing America Saves staff, led by the untiring George Barani, for doing a spectacular job in organizing this summit. Over the years, America Saves has supported hundreds of thousands of people who have taken the America Saves pledge to save, and influenced millions of people to start or save more successfully. Generating opportunities for low and moderate income individuals to become successful savers is a critical tenet of this program. And from the beginning, this effort has only been possible because certain financial institutions, banks, and credit unions offered no-fee, low opening balance savings accounts to support those who could only save small amounts. We thank you. Over the years, we've expanded our efforts with a focus on the military, first-time young workers, the workplace, and low and moderate income families. None of this would have been possible without the extraordinarily dedicated staff and many of you who are attending this virtual session. So thank you all for taking on the challenge of improving the financial welfare of American citizens. As America's wealth gap grows, so does the incredible importance of savings. Well, some have given up on the potential for increasing savings and the financial health of needy Americans. By joining us today, you've made the decision not to give up and actually make a difference. You've made the decision to help change savings behavior. So on behalf of CFA's over 250 organizations representing tens of millions of Americans, we thank you and begin this summit with great hope. So now let me turn this over to America's ABLE Director, George Barani. George?
Thank you, Jack. And I welcome all of you to the 2020 America Saves Summit. So very different than when we gathered last year to challenge the crisis facing almost half of all Americans who could not meet unexpected expenses of less than $500 without going into debt. We made ambitious commitments together to reach over 5 million people, to motivate, encourage, support, and facilitate the process to have more Americans who use or have access to direct deposit for their pay and have a bank or credit relationship, to set up the mechanism to save automatically for emergencies. We didn't realize at that time how financial conditions for many would become so much worse and how more important emergency savings would be. All of us have redirected or pivoted our efforts in some way during this time of health and financial crisis. At America Saves, we have focused on supporting people who face dire financial conditions, those receiving stimulus payments, and those still working. We have preserved our supportive and non-shaming tone towards our audience, but changed some of our language to be more practical and relevant in these unprecedented times. You will hear in our first session about our new efforts to reach consumers directly, providing them with not only expert advice, but resources and support. Thanks to many sponsors and all hands team effort, we had over 21,000 people participate in 3 town hall events with very positive outcomes. We have also increased our efforts to encourage more Americans to think like a saver. This isn't only a catchphrase for America Saves, but a philosophy. Our way of having people not only set up automatic saving, but also look at their daily lives with thoughtfulness and optimism for a more stable and enjoyable future. Today and tomorrow, we will hear from practitioners and experts in the field of current financial conditions and circumstances of various Americans. We will discuss how to increase our efforts to support more Americans to save and develop some financial stability, all the while recognizing and being mindful of current financial and health barriers. Our combined efforts to inform and support people to save for emergencies has to increase. Emergency savings is front of mind for so many, and we need to take advantage of this moment of crisis to provide the needed support, information, encouragement, products, and services to help people establish and increase their ability to achieve financial stability. Now I want to introduce our opening panel, a roundtable. What are the barriers to promoting savings in unstable times? This roundtable will explore in depth the current varied financial landscape, including findings from our own town halls hosted this fall. While unemployment is soaring, many others are better off financially than they were before the pandemic. And these experts will give us insight to their specific fields and address the tension of promoting savings during such a time as this. So let me introduce first Kia Young, the America Saves Director of Communications and a member of the America Saves leadership team. Sarah Godlewski, the Wisconsin State Treasurer. Rebecca Wiggins, Director of AFCPE. Shannon Razadin, Director of Military Family Advisory Network. And Bruce McClary, Senior Vice President for Communications at the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. Kia, can you kick us off, please?
Sure thing. Thanks, George. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and the financial crisis, America Saves was very cognizant of our messaging. As our savers run the gamut from low income to moderate income levels, we recognize that the language that you use for a person who's barely making ends meet is vastly different from someone who's financially stable, but simply wants to be a better steward of how they spend their money and save their money. So at the onset of the pandemic, we recognized quickly that there was no one-size-fits-all approach to savings. And what confirmed that was the feedback that we received from our partners and savers on a decision tree that we created that walked our savers through how to best allocate their stimulus check. It allowed our savers to self-identify where they fit in, and it gave them a proposed solution based on their unique situation. That decision tree became one of our most downloaded resources that we've ever had that wasn't tied to America Saves Week. And we all know that success leaves clues. So now, up until this year, America Saves really focused on communication with our savers strictly through a social marketing lens. So emails, text messages, social media, and largely creating resources for our partners, for you to share with your communities. And while that has been really successful, we knew as a team we wanted to make a direct impact. So we did a little brainstorming. Our small team of 10 at America Saves really truly mirrors America. We have all age groups from 20s to 60s, white, Black, Latinas, military, non-military, those that live in urban areas, rural areas. And so we really put all of our knowledge, our own lived experiences together and concluded that Americans need specific things to help them navigate the financial crisis. And we landed on 5 things that we really wanted to provide: down to earth, relatable, real discussions about money, allowing people to self-identify where they fit into the financial landscape so that it was crystal clear to them what advice would work for them. We wanted to provide tangible, simple, but still powerful tools and resources that they could implement right away. We wanted to give money, because people need that right now, and support from a financial coach or counselor. And so that's how our Think Like a Saver virtual town hall series was brought to life. Over the past 8 weeks, we've held 3 town halls, Simple Strategies to Help You Save, which focused on the basics, okay? The people got a clear view of their finances, were able to use our spending and savings tool to create. We stress the importance of savings being a habit, not a destination. And for those that were new to saving, starting off with a $500 emergency fund and building on that savings habit muscle and expanding from there. Our second town hall was How Do I Pay Off Debt, where we focused on the nitty-gritty details about consumer debt, student loan debt, and credit scores. And our last town hall was Saving for Major Life Milestones, where we focused on long-term savings goals, education, homeownership, and retirement. In each one, again, we let our savers self-identify and called out 3 specific groups. One that had savings that they were having to spend down. The second group had no savings and COVID was a wake-up call for them. And that third group was doing better than they were prior to the COVID pandemic. We made it really clear that we understand where everyone is, that we're all in different places, and our experts gave specific advice for each one of those 3 groups. And then we had tangible tools that they could leave the town hall with and use right away. Each town hall gave away 10 $500 cash prizes, and we offered free financial coaching and counseling for everyone who attended from the Yellow Ribbon Network through their partnership with AFCPE. So we hit all 5 of those needs that our team brainstormed. And the response was simply overwhelming. 3 town halls that we had 21,498 participants, over 2,500 engagements across our social media platforms. And so far, we've sent almost 500 people to the Yellow Ribbon Network website. There's a lot of renewed energy on our team, but a lot of renewed hopeful energy for our savers. And we built a lot of trust with them over those 3 events. And it solidified 3 things for us. People want to know that they are seen, accepted, and supported. They want simple tools to help them be successful. And we found out that you get better results when people can self-identify through the information and content that we create. And so for us, that is our way forward. So tomorrow, I'll be chatting about how all of this that we learned from the town halls will translate to America Saves Week, and of course, how you, our partners, can join us.
Thank you, Kia. Sarah, can you tell us what's going on in Wisconsin and some of the challenges you face in encouraging your residents to save?
Yeah, well, thanks, George. And I just want to thank America Saves and everybody on this call for participating, because as state treasurer, I will tell you, helping people save is not only the right thing to do, it's good for our economy. So as George was saying, saving is a topic that is near and dear to me. And so I thought I would share some of the stories that I've been hearing as we've been working to address this topic over the past couple of years. And I wanted to start actually with my generation. So I'm a millennial. Please don't hold that against me. And when I look around and talk to people in my generation, we have more debt, we have less savings, and overall, we have significantly less wealth than our parents and our grandparents. And so between rising costs and stagnant wages, debt is often the only option we have. I mean, let's look at college costs. So for my parents, who are baby boomers, to go to a 4-year public college, they would have to work 306 hours of a minimum wage job. But for my generation to go to a 4-year public school and work a minimum wage job, I would have to work 4,459 hours. So you can see it's hard to get ahead if you can't even keep up. And that's what we're hearing from people that are in their 20s and 30s. And then other work that we've been doing in the field is working with communities of color with financial equity. And I'll share a story that I heard right before the pandemic hit. It was with a woman named Gloria in Milwaukee. And she was working 2 minimal wage jobs. One was a temp job, another was a seasonal delivery job, and her car broke down. And she literally had nothing saved. And so she was like, look, Sarah, I didn't really know what else I could do. I don't have any assets to my name. I don't have great credit. And she had nothing saved. And so her only option was to go to a payday lender. And here in the state of Wisconsin, we can charge up to 600% interest. And she knew that that was not a good choice, but she felt like she didn't have any other option. And she said, I think she said it best. She goes, look, it's expensive being poor. And these were stories that we were hearing pre-COVID. I think what really COVID has done is shine a light on how important it is to develop these savings tools, because the reality is it's not if a financial crisis happens again, it's really about when. And so when the financial crisis, when COVID hit Wisconsin, I still am chairing the Retirement Security Task Force for the state of Wisconsin as we look at how people can retire and have peace of mind here in Wisconsin. And when COVID hit and people overnight were seeing themselves underemployed and unemployed, one of the things I was asking myself is, should we look at something like retirement security? Because is that going to seem like we're not in touch? Because people are worried about paying bills and putting food on their table, and we're talking about something like retirement security. So we reached out to citizens and talked with folks across our state, and I will tell you 2 key themes really surfaced from our conversations. One is that the folks that I spoke to that had retirement accounts, they were actually using them as emergency savings accounts because they had no other savings. And they were grateful for at least this account because, as one woman was telling me, she's like, I would have no other way of paying my property tax bill if it wasn't for the ability to go into my 401k. And she knew that that was not the best thing to do as she was in her 40s, and that was going to have a long-term impact. But again, she felt like she had no other option. And then the other group that we talked to were the folks that did not, for example, have a retirement account. And what they really realized throughout this pandemic is that they wish they did. And they wish that they would have had access to the tools to be able to do this. And even putting away $1 or $2 could have made a difference. And so between these conversations that I've been having during COVID, as people are worried about living paycheck to paycheck, to even those conversations I mentioned earlier with folks that were facing this squeeze even before the pandemic, I think what we are realizing is that now is the opportunity to really be promoting these saving strategies, because it's not that people don't want to do it. As Kia said, they do, but we just have to make sure it fits within their lifestyle, and we talk to them in a way that best fits their needs. So again, I just want to thank America Saves for doing this, and I look forward to our conversations over the next 2 days.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. Rebecca, can you give us a sense of what you're hearing from financial coaches and counselors?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us today and for having this conversation. I want to start out just by saying, so much of what has already been mentioned, I think, is really critical to emphasizing the layers of the uncertainty, right? It's not just the pandemic, just about health, just about job loss. It's also been at a time when we're experiencing this huge racial awareness in this country of the injustice and inequality. And we know that people are differently situated. We knew that before, as you mentioned, George. People were already struggling financially before the pandemic. There were, already large numbers and growing inequality. But I think it's important, especially as we look at what our work is in the field and what our professionals need to be equipped to know and do and be sensitive to, that this is really disproportionately impacting women, people of color, and very specifically women of color. And so that's one thing that I think just needs to be said at the outset, because as you've already mentioned, this is something that we want to make sure we're not approaching things from a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think that's just important to mention. The other thing is that money is more than the numbers, and we all know this, but it's something that's very personal. It's personal to all of us. It impacts everything that we do in our lives, and all of the goals that we have. And so when you're experiencing high levels of, really this year, it's been sort of chronic fear, chronic uncertainty, again, that layered approach where people are dealing with different worries. We're not always making the best choices or what we would consider the most rational. And I think we're seeing that play out with our clients, where just knowing what to do is often not, playing into what they're actually doing for themselves, and can be very paralyzing. There is some good news. I actually just read a study that was sharing that people actually reported the importance of teaching money management ahead of nutrition, the value of teaching nutrition, and the dangers of drugs and alcohol, which I'm not saying those are not important, but it was really encouraging to see that teaching money management is seen as something as important, and in this particular study, actually more important. So I think that's good news, and hopefully will be a trend for us in the field. There's also been an increased, investment in, as you share, the work that America Saves is doing, but in the profession in terms of connecting people to qualified, credentialed financial counselors and coaches. And as was mentioned already too, that clients are really receptive to this idea of savings. They understand the urgency, maybe in a way that they didn't before. And so I want to echo some of my sort of comments here have already been shared in different ways. As Kia said, there are sort of these umbrellas of consumers and what they're going through. We have some of our clients have been experiencing just pure crisis. They are looking for help for food, utilities, rent, really sort of the basics. And so savings, while they are still receptive, so I think that's encouraging to note, they understand the why, but they're struggling with the how. And so some of our counselors are talking about how can they make their dollars stretch using some of the services that may be in their community, for instance, a food pantry, so that they can put that money towards their rent when it comes due and things like that. So there are some unique things that I think, again, making sure that it's not one size fits all, understanding what the resources are in that community. The big barriers that people are still experiencing, again, go back pre-pandemic. These are high levels of debt, student loans. Some of our counselors reported that their clients are concerned about transitioning out of the military at this time. So it kind of depends. We have counselors all over the country working in a variety of sectors. And so those are sort of the trends, but of course they can be different within that. The other sort of big pool that I would say of consumers is, as you mentioned before, people who were not directly impacted. And within that, I would say there's two groups. One who maybe they still have their job. They, again, haven't been necessarily directly impacted health-wise by the pandemic, but they are realizing that they don't have the savings that they need, as well as people who are, as you said, doing even better, perhaps. Maybe they're able to save even more money. And within that group, that's been the most encouraging towards getting people on saving automatically and, maybe establishing better, more thorough savings plans in their financial plan. So I think that's all really encouraging as well. Several of our counselors are trying to work with clients about reimagining the holidays. I think we've all learned some good lessons about what's important this year. So this is a great time for that lesson, but also just, as things are progressing, we have no idea when this is going to end. And so as the numbers are surging, most of the places around the country, I know at least where we are, it's best to just keep things as simple as possible so that you can put some money away and have that safety net just in case you do have job loss in the next couple of months or some other, shutdown occurs that impacts people's financial life. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And the other sort of tip that our counselors and coaches are really helping people with is beyond just the automatic savings, and you talked about it before, in terms of just understanding the habit. It doesn't have to be a lot, but if we can get people to start building that into what they do every day, every paycheck, and understanding how that can build and compound, I think that's the key. And trying to put it away somewhere that maybe isn't as accessible in a separate account, maybe at a separate institution, things like that. So again, it's not one size fits all. It's important to work with somebody who is qualified, who understands the nuances. And going back to what I said at the outset, who understands that these things are beyond the numbers, and that all of these factors, systemic inequality, racial inequality, have even more compounding impacts in people's lives. And we need to be really sensitive to that and how they are coming to the table and how we can help them move forward.
Thanks, Rebecca, and really appreciate our partnership in offering free financial coaching and counseling to America Savers. So thank you. Shannon, if you could give us a sense for what you're seeing with the military community.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me. A little bit about who we are as an organization, the Military Family Advisory Network. What we do is we bring together a really diverse group of military families to help us understand what the emerging needs are within our community, and then we test that through research. So before I talk about the barriers that we're seeing right now, I want to talk a little bit about what we saw in our most recent survey, which was fielded before COVID in 2019. Emergency savings, we've heard earlier during this call about $500. 27.4% of our active duty military family respondents did not have $500 in saving. And what was even more concerning is about 25% of our overarching respondents didn't have a plan, again, pre-COVID, did not have a plan for what they would do if they found themselves in a financial emergency. We are always concerned as an organization about people when they're really stressed and really nervous about their finances, making a poor decision like going to a payday lender or like seeking out support that might not be productive for them long term related to their finances. And so we are always intent on directing people to best in class resources that are out there, like our friends at NFCC, for example, so that they get that customized support, that financial education that they need, so that they don't find themselves essentially getting themselves in deeper and deeper in a hole. Another thing that was really sad and frankly humbling related to our 2019 findings, we found that 1 in 8 of our survey respondents nationally was food insecure. 1 in 8. These are military families, people who are currently wearing the uniform. 1 in 8 nationally was food insecure. We worked with the USDA's scale to really help us understand where they were falling related to food insecurity and what the experiences were. And we heard everything like, people just choosing not to eat because they wanted to make sure that the service member or the children had food. Or we heard things like a woman was eating cat food until she got connected to a food pantry so that she could get food for herself and her family. And so these are really heart-wrenching stories before COVID. And when we dove deeper into our findings, we were finding that in specific parts of the country, for example, Texas and the Norfolk area, it was as high as 1 in 6 of our survey respondents who were food insecure. And so as an organization, we are launching a really comprehensive research effort this winter actually to uncover what are those underlying factors that lead to food insecurity in the military community, because it's something that really catches people off guard. You wouldn't necessarily think that people who are serving right now would experience food insecurity, but there are complexities related to the life that we live that makes it a little bit harder. So when you think about the military life and the military, life cycle, if you will, military families move on average every 2.5 years. So when you think about that full restart that you make in your life and the out-of-pocket expenses that you might not think about. So for example, if you're moving from, Florida to where I am, Newport, Rhode Island, you're going to need some new clothes. And every time you have those restarts, it puts you in a bit of a hole. When we look at our data and we see kind of what families are spending related to their move that are unreimbursed costs, it's about $5,000 every time they move that they have to come up with. So they're entering into debt in some cases related to making those ends meet. But when you think about every 2.5 years having that $5,000 come off the top, it's really, really difficult for families. And sometimes entering into housing markets where there just might not be a ton of options. And so families are having to make tough decisions as far as where they choose to live based on what's available, based on what their basic allowance for housing is, and things like that. The other thing that I think is really important to remember is military families, when I talked about food insecurity, most military families do not qualify for SNAP, which is commonly known as food stamps. And that's because the basic allowance for housing is incorporated in as income. So military families, you're going through all this and you don't have some of those safety nets that many Americans are able to tap into when they find themselves having a hard time making ends meet. Someone mentioned earlier in the call that this is about more than numbers, it's about more than money. There's a personal component that affects you as a human being, your self-efficacy. And so we really want to make sure that we are using that inclusive language. We're making sure that we are helping people get support in a way that reduces any stigma, perceived or real. Because for military families, there are added when you think about things like security clearance. So if you're in a financial situation that's unhealthy or you have an excessive amount of debt, those types of things can impact your security clearance. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult for families to seek out support than they might otherwise. When you think about COVID-19 and what military families are going through, it's important to note that mission first, it's still mission first. So military families are continuing to move during COVID. When you think about what we've all done and how we've worked hard to protect ourselves and our families through all of this, we're becoming a little bit more insular. Military families are trying to figure out how to move their families, in some cases across the country, in some cases around the world, while protecting themselves and their families from COVID. So for some families, they are choosing to move themselves. When you think about the cost of moving yourself, gosh knows wherever the military might send you, that leads to out-of-pocket expenses that you might not have been able to plan for. But families are put in that situation of, do I have someone come into my home who I might not know? I trust that they're doing the background related to COVID, but it's still a stressor for families. And so there are expenses that are coming up. And then all of us right now are wearing a lot more hats than we typically would. So over here, a mom of two, we trying to figure out, fortunately, my kids are in school, but many parents, they don't have childcare right now. Their kids aren't in school. And so you're juggling a lot. Employment has always been a perennial issue for military spouses. It's compounded now. And the child development military families rely on have had to scale back the number of families that they can serve because of COVID. So it's a really difficult, it's a complex time. I totally agree that getting people in the habit and aware of how to save is so important, especially as we think through those emergency savings that, sometimes I think that has seemed for many to be abstract, but now in this, during and hopefully soon post-COVID environment, we know that emergency savings are very real, and we really need to have that and make sure that we have that safety net so that we don't find ourselves in a situation of major financial stress, because we definitely know that impacts other areas of life and well-being as well.
Thanks, Shannon. Really appreciate that, because we oftentimes don't really hear about those personal problems that our service members, their spouses, their families are going through. So thank you. Bruce, can you give us a sense of what you're hearing from credit counselors?
Yes, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to address this very important topic of savings. As the nation's largest and longest serving nonprofit agencies providing direct counseling and also programs that are directly assistive in helping people repay debt, one of the main things that we've been finding this year is that the impact of debt on people's ability to save is very different among different groups. And there's, I think Rebecca put it appropriately when she said that there are layers, and we have those very same layers in working with the people that we've assisted throughout the year. And as a part of the problem, imagine once we entered the year, we had a very different picture in January of what this year would look like and what our priorities would be in promoting savings and helping people pay down debt. And none of us could imagine how different the world would be in April. So around that time frame in March and April, the NFCC and all of its nonprofit counseling agencies across the country quickly pivot to work with consumers who were facing situations of extreme hardship helping them overcome the issues that stood in the way of keeping their debt on track, help them make some very tough decisions about what to do with any available savings that they had and how do we use that during a time of crisis, and also work with people who were not adequately prepared with savings and may not have had any savings, and try to provide some answers and some programs and solutions for them. And I think what we found is a lot of clarity on circumstances that people are facing, how different they are among different relations, regionally, et cetera, and the areas that we need to focus on in the year ahead as we work. And during this time, I think one of the things that has helped us in assisting people overcome some of the debt challenges throughout the year and try not to have to rely so much on their emergency savings, or at least get by when they've depleted that, found is that there's been a lot of support for us from the creditors, from the credit card, in standing up programs that went to market rather quickly, surprising in April and May, to get people through temporary hardship situations when we were seeing mass layoffs and cutbacks at work. So people could be allowed to skip payments without penalty 1, 2, or 3 months while they had time to get back on at the end of that period and get back to work. And the people that were seeking those services, able to assist them by working with the creditors in standing up a program that would provide contact in helping people identify the programs that were available and qualify for those programs and activate those so they could keep everything on track, because it's not just about one creditor, it's about 5 or 6 creditors, and it just becomes a very difficult process. Also, one of the things that we've had the benefit of this year is that our annual financial literacy search, which is typically fielded in February, gave us a pre-pandemic picture of people's finances coming into the beginning of the year. The follow-up survey that we conducted, we actually did 2 surveys, one in May and one in October, a view, an apples to apples comparison of the data from the beginning of how different trends have unfolded related to debt management, related to overall spending, and also related to areas of concern. So just real quickly to talk about some of the things that we found in the surveys, we found that more than 1 in 3 adults say they're now spending less than compared to 1 year ago, but also less compared to May. And then we've also seen that because spending is down, obviously savings habits have also been impacted. And more than 1/3 of the people in our survey say there's actually saving more as compared to 1 year ago. And the population that is still gainfully employed and might have the benefit of not commuting or not traveling on vacation, et cetera. So they've got more money that they can. Also, they have more money to use to pay down their debt, which we thought. But as that group has grown, so has the group that we're seeing that is saving less. And so those who are last year and previous years is getting squeezed out on both ends. And the people that are saving more or saving less are growing. Another area that I thought was very interesting is that there is stress and concern, and we have different categories that we look at. The top area of finance was rainy day savings for emergency. And that group that reported that this year is significantly larger than in previous years. And especially as the pandemic continued, that portion, again, people, even those with sufficient savings now, are concerned about the future because of the pandemic and how the economy will react and whether they'll still have employment. So the rainy day savings issue is center. And of course, then we talk about how people's finances have been impacted. And people have been, 22% have said they've had to dip into some or all of their savings to get by during the pandemic. 16% credit card spending, and 12% say they're utilizing some form of unemployment benefit. And if we think about that, one of the areas of 2021 is the fact that many of these lifelines the ability to skip payments on student loan debt, the forbearance programs for mortgages, temporary hardship programs for credit cards, and even extended unemployment benefits that are terming out in December. So our focus is definitely going to be on the income, the demand for counseling services in the year ahead, given the fact that many of these lifelines are going to go away, and you've got this portion you've got another portion that's using their credit cards in lieu of savings, and those are going to come to a pretty abrupt stop when they run out of room in their credit. They're going to need help managing their debt. So our focus is going to be to help people getting back with their debt, but also to put in place a plan that is sustainable in the year and years ahead to build the savings they may have depleted and get back on track while also getting their debt under control.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate that and your good work. And I want to thank everybody on the panel for their commitment to make a difference in people's lives and the great work that you're doing. One quick question. Let me ask that of Rebecca and Bruce primarily. Stimulus payments, hopefully on the horizon, are going to be coming through. Will that make a difference in terms of people coming to see your counselors, coaches?
I would say, just based on what I understand, that stimulus might look like, and it's very uncertain about the details of what that's going to include. There's a lot of debate going on right now, but for the financial hardships that people are experiencing, especially those who are looking for help with debt management and debt repayment, who are already in a serious state of delinquency, where they might be facing eviction in rental circumstances, where they might be facing foreclosure when those options run out. I honestly don't think that whatever is proposed in the stimulus plan, especially when we're talking about the cash out payment directly to individual households, will be sufficient for some of the ones that we see most frequently, who are in some of the more distressed financial circumstances. So again, that's an area of concern and also motivation for us to enhance the programs that we currently offer for long-term solutions and identify new programs. And one of the programs that we're going to be launching in January deals directly with people who are facing rental eviction. And we're actually creating a program that is similar to the debt management plan, but it is for renters, and it creates a way for renters to stay in their homes and have an affordable, sustainable repayment plan with their landlord, so that they don't have to go through eviction if they owe back rent. So those are some of the ways that we're going to be addressing this. I don't think the stimulus might adequately solve all of the problems that people are having in those areas. It will help for some, but not for everybody.
Rebecca, anything you want to add to that?
I think that was very well said. The only thing I would say is that I think it very well could, and I think we did see that a little bit when we stood up our free financial counseling and coaching. It was right at the time that the stimulus passed. And so I think it could have an impact. I am hoping, though, that with this increased awareness over the year, and as Bruce said, it will impact people differently, that there's going to be more need for it. So we'll see, but it could definitely have an impact. I think that's an important question.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that insightful and important information and conversation. Thank you all. We now want to turn to some key partners who, as a result of not only the pandemic, but also the public outcry against institutional racism, have increased their financial and programmatic efforts to attempt to address consequences of both of these situations. So this next panel is focused on COVID-19, racial inequities, and financial stability, confronting disproportionate impact. We've got a great panel here, and I thank everybody for participating. Let me introduce Nicole Sanchez, head of unbanked and underbanked and mass segments at JP Morgan Chase. Christian Baumfalk, Senior Vice President, Savings Executive at Bank of America. Joe Gurney, Senior Advisor, Fiscal Stewardship to the Undersecretary for Benefits at the Veterans Affairs Administration, and Michael Rausch, Director, Center for Disability Inclusive Development at the National Disability Institute. Nick.
Thank you for the warm welcome. And I just wanted to say, we at JP Morgan Chase have been amplifying and excited about financial health for years. And I just want to connect the dots on one of the commitments we made last year. So last year, we committed and publicly stated here that we wanted to help 2 million consumers automatically save. And I'm excited to share that we exceeded that goal. And not only did we exceed that goal, we saw an acceleration of savings. So as your prior panel spoke to, there are many more customers who are saving, both in our everyday people clients and our college students. And most excitingly, we're seeing that Gen Z saw the biggest increase in their savings behavior. We also helped over 1 million women save billions of dollars. And in partnership with our Women in the Move effort, we helped reach over 200,000 women with content on how they can save and manage liquidity in uncertain times. And finally, as we think about automatic savings, we developed new capabilities. So things like goal-based savings were our new capabilities that we delivered to our customers this year. But what I think is most relevant to this panel is how we doubled down in our commitment to ensuring that underserved communities are able to save and reach their financial goals. This October, JP Morgan Chase committed an additional $30 billion to advance racial equity. The firm will harness its expertise in business, policy, and philanthropy to commit $30 billion over the next 5 years to address the key drivers of the racial wealth divide, reduce systemic racism against Black and Latinx people, and support our employees. It is the collective responsibility of business and government leaders to stand up and address centuries of structural racism. We can all do better and do more, and our words and actions matter. Structural barriers in the US have created profound racial inequalities that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The existing racial wealth gap puts a strain on families' economic mobility and restricts the US economy. And building on our firm's existing investments, this new commitment will drive an inclusive economic recovery, support employees, and break down barriers of systemic racism. JP Morgan Chase will harness its expertise in business, public policy, and philanthropy across 4 core areas to help tackle racial inequities and provide economic opportunity for Black and Latinx communities by doing 4 things. 1, promoting and expanding affordable housing and homeownership. 2, growing minority-owned businesses. 3, improving financial health. And 4, further supporting our employees and increasing workforce diversity. And these efforts aim to address the key drivers of the racial wealth divide head-on. From the way we do business to the policies we advocate for, these commitments are part of our continued effort to bring an enhanced equity lens to JP Morgan Chase's businesses and how we serve customers, communities, and employees. Specifically, the firm is intensifying our efforts to break down the racial wealth divide by making new investments over the next 5 years. For promoting and expanding expandable housing and home ownership for underserved communities, we will aim to originate over 40,000 home purchase loans for Black and Latinx households with a commitment of $8 billion in mortgages. We're also helping an additional 20,000 Black and Latinx individuals refinance and 100,000 achieve affordable housing through affordable rental units. For Black-owned businesses and Latinx-owned businesses, we want to provide an additional 15,000 of loans to small businesses aligned with a $2 billion commitment and spend an additional $750 million with Black and Latinx suppliers. And for improving financial health and access to banking in Black and Latinx communities, we help to not only help 1 million people open low-cost savings or low-cost checking or savings accounts, but also amplify tools like AutoSave to help them automatically save towards that rainy day fund that we all know that they need. Additionally, we're doubling down on our efforts and accelerating investment in our employees, building more diverse workplace and employment, and we will provide a $2 billion commitment in philanthropic capital over the next 5 years to drive this inclusive economic recovery and support Black and Latinx and other underserved communities. This extends our existing 1.75 million commitment that we made in 2018, and we'll have an emphasis on Black and Latinx-led organizations. Our commitments are not a one and done effort. We will track these business changes and new investments over time to evaluate their impact. And additionally, the firm will share this with our outside advocates to assess their performance and hold our business accountable so we can better understand trends and contributing factors to these problems. We stand together at acknowledging that systemic racism is a tragic part of America's history, and we are deeply committed to rooting out racial discrimination anywhere it exists. We can and will do more and do better to drive real and sustainable change for Black and Latinx people in our company and in America. And so with that, George, I just wanted to say we are so excited to be able to open this panel to hear more about all of the great work the industry is doing and organizations like you are doing to help communities that are facing disproportionate impact.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks for your significant commitments to make a difference in the lives of so many Americans. Christian, tough act to follow, but I'm sure you can.
Thanks, George, and thanks for this invitation. And you're right, Nicole, impressive work that you all are doing there at JP Morgan Chase. As far as Bank of America reaction to this current environment, as has been widely noted, we are first of all addressing a health and humanitarian crisis with the coronavirus. That has led to the economic crisis and the significant recession that we continue to see our clients suffer through. And additionally, as Nicole noted, over the past several months, we as a company and as a nation have come together with a really intense passion for racial equality. At Bank of America, we feel that urgency and we are taking action. Well, the data clearly show is that issues of racial equality and economic opportunity are deeply connected. Where we see racial injustices, there's often a lack of economic mobility and opportunity, and vice versa. They feed into each other. And as noted earlier, this current health and humanitarian crisis is having a disproportionate impact on people and communities of color. So what are we doing? First, I'll talk a little bit about what we have done and continue to do for our clients. And George, as I was doing a little homework here, I made some notes on we're providing enhanced sanitation in our financial centers that are open, providing masks for our employees and clients to wear, gloves and barriers between teller stations. And I thought, well, of course we are. Everybody's doing that. But when we gathered a year ago in DC for this in-person summit, none of that was on our mind. None of us were talking about cleaning protocols in financial centers or wearing masks or barriers between humans needing to interact with each other. So it's remarkable just how business as usual and important those type of actions have come even just over the past 9 months. In addition, we've really strived to ensure that we can provide the high-tech and high-touch service that our clients need and want, especially those who are in our LMI communities. So as part of that, we've kept open as many financial centers as we possibly could based on local market conditions and how the virus is rearing itself in those neighborhoods and communities. We've actually opened additional financial centers throughout the course of this year. Most recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've opened new centers in Flushing and Brooklyn, New York. And a month ago, we expanded into Cleveland for the first time with in-person financial centers. And finally, for our clients, we've made it easier to bank by providing drive-up banking, either opening or in some cases reopening drive-through teller windows at our financial centers. On the high-tech side of things, we're very proud of the 24/7 access our clients can have to their finances through either online or mobile banking, which has proven itself to be even more critical in this pandemic period than it was before. And we've really seen an acceleration in the adoption of our digital tools. And then finally, for our small business clients, we were the largest provider of paycheck protection loans as measured by the number of loans. We helped distribute more than $26 billion to close to 350,000 clients. Almost all of those, 99%, had fewer than 100 employees. So getting that federal stimulus money into the hands of small business employers where it can make a difference in local communities. Then turning to community involvement, there's 3 things I'll mention that Bank of America has committed to. The numbers are large, but I think it's important to put them in some local context as well. So the first, and I had to go back and find the surprise to see that as early as March 17th, and we all know what was happening around March 17th, is when Bank of America committed $100 million to support pressing needs related to the coronavirus in vulnerable communities. And that's on top of our annual already pledged $250 million in those communities. What that $100 million go to, I'll give you two examples. George, there in DC where you are, we made a $1 million grant to the Howard University Hospital for free coronavirus testing in disadvantaged neighborhoods. That was right at the start. It was critical to get that kind of help on the ground, and $1 million went toward that. We allocated $500,000 to the Altamed Community Health Clinics in Los Angeles, which primarily serve low to moderate income and Latinx community. So that's one. Second, as you may have read some about, we have made a $1 billion four-year commitment to help drive racial equality and economic opportunity. And this is really focused on people and communities of color. We're doing this all through a lens of racial equity. This was announced mid or early summer in the June timeframe. There are, similar to Nicole's work at Chase, we have four main areas we're focusing on here. And we've already allocated or earmarked and started working with $300 million of that $1 billion commitment. So the four areas are health and healthcare, jobs and reskilling, where we're partnering with community colleges, HBCUs, and Hispanic serving institutions. Third is small business support. And fourth is affordable housing. And we focused on these areas because that's where we found and really believe that systemic long-term gaps have existed and where significant and meaningful change is required for us to see progress that can be sustained. And finally, we've issued two large first-of-their-kind bonds. Again, the numbers are big: $1 billion corporate social bond to support the fight against COVID, and that's a four-year bond whose proceeds will benefit not-for-profit hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, and those who manufacture healthcare equipment and PPE. And then finally, a $2 billion, this is a big phrase, Equality, Progress, Sustainability Bond. I have to read that. And that is really geared toward advancing racial equality, economic opportunity, and even environmental sustainability. That's a 5-year bond. So you can see just by the duration of these efforts we're committing to, we're in this for the long haul, both on the health and humanitarian front and in the fight to advance racial equality.
Thanks, Christian. Really great stuff on the part of Bank of America. Focused, tangible, targeted. Thank you. Joe, can you share with us what's going on at the VA?
Yes, and thanks for having me today. These are tough acts to follow, but I'll certainly do my best. Let me share with you a little bit about, what we've been dealing with the unbanked, and then take you through about what we did to implement a solution, and which was sort of timely with the pandemic. So last year, about this time, and about 11 months ago, 12 months ago, we, through our kind of research analysis, had identified that over 250,000 veterans didn't have a bank account, nor, or they were getting checks. So they were either getting money on a prepaid card, which didn't give them the ability to save, or they were getting a check in the mail. And through that, we found that, veterans were dealing with fraud, poor customers, something did come up with a prepaid card. They were dealing with checks getting lost, and some of these folks are living month to month. So it's not like, these veterans could say, well, I'll just wait till it comes, or they'll resolve it. These are folks that needed the money. So with that, 250,000 people, veterans, we actually reached out to a group called the Association of Military Banks of America, called AMBA, and partnered to develop what we call the Veterans Benefits Banking Program. And it's a banking program that has 34 financial institutions in the program right now, with the goal of providing veterans a bank account if they need it, and with minimal to zero cost, as long as they're getting their benefit checks deposited. And, part of the reason I say it was timely was a lot of the veterans during the time prior to the pandemic, since they were either getting a prepaid card or a check, were literally going to a check cashing place to get their checks cashed. They were constantly having to be on the go to get their money. And largely they were taking their money out, and I'll say putting it under a mattress because they wanted the money quickly out of the prepaid card, but no ability to save, no ability to add to it. And, we see, at VA, one of the leading causes of stress for veterans is financial stress, and having to live month to month and worry about, hey, is this check gonna, am I gonna get this check, or is the prepaid card gonna work? All of these things is extremely stressful. So through AMBA and through the banks and the credit unions we had partnered with, we set up this banking program. And the banking program allows veterans to bank mobily. When the pandemic ends, they'll be able to bank in person, so they could go into their local branch, which will provide an easy access for them. They'll have certainly reduction in fraud, which is really a big thing for this program. And then finally, with all of this, in the last, I think it's been 5 months, we've converted over 25,000 people or veterans to a bank account, which may seem like a small number, but it's a very large number when you're considering, the folks living month to month and now have the ability to save, which, in this time, not having to save for, honestly, it could be a car, gas, oil change. It could be something, having that ability now to have a bank account, knowing it's safe, and for these banks or credit unions to provide the security that a veteran could need is really tantamount right now. And what I'll say is we started this program with the idea of, hey, let's just help, a veteran get a bank account. We see this program more like a forever program where we will continually add on to this program, with the hopes of increasing financial education awareness and tools, potentially counseling, along the way, but continually update this program so we can hit the life cycle of a veteran throughout, once they're leaving the military, to retirement, to handling their affairs after. So that the goal is really to look at the life cycle. The banking and getting the veterans bank accounts is honestly was the first piece of this, but I feel like the more awareness we have made for veterans about the Veterans Benefits Banking Program, the greater success we've had. I mean, we've done campaigns where we've mailed veterans. We've done campaigns where we've done video casts just to get the word out. And I couldn't thank the banks and credit unions enough for who are participating on this, because it couldn't have been done without them, as well as AMBA and the Credit Union Council. I mean, AMBA has been just the best partner in this, in supporting us and helping VBA along the way. But this program, truly is a way, and I'll call it the unbanked or the underbanked, to have a chance to get their financial freedom and get on the road to financial success from the start and not have to wait until it's too big of a hole.
Thanks very much, Joe. Important work to get those veterans banked, and I can only imagine how difficult that kind of work is. Michael, if you would share with us what's going on with the disability community, oftentimes overlooked in the midst of a crisis.
Great. Hi, George. Thank you so much to America Saves for inviting me and the National Disability Institute to be a part of this conversation today on building financial stability in unstable times. For those of you who aren't familiar with the National Disability Institute, we are working to build a better financial future for people with disabilities. During this time, like many in our country and around the world, COVID-19 has impacted our financial lives and has an impact on our psychosocial needs. At NDI, our research indicates that people with disabilities are more likely than those without disabilities to live in poverty, more likely to be in a low-wage job even when employed, less likely to have accumulated savings, and less likely to be able to come up with funds if an unexpected need arose. So when the pandemic happened, it exacerbated this financial situation even more for people with disabilities and many others across the country. In addition to these statistics, as we know, we also know that 18% of households with a disability are unbanked. And although some people with disabilities are able to weather the financial impact of COVID-19, for many it is difficult to navigate these challenging times and has often caused an increased emotional and financial stress. In addition to the financial aspect, our work has found that social isolation has been a key issue impacting people with disabilities. We heard during the listening sessions we hosted earlier this year when the pandemic started, and with other groups as the pandemic continues, we heard from people with disabilities and the families about the fear of not having access to health care, the fear of getting COVID-19, who will take care of them, who will support them. Also the fear of not being able to pay bills and the fear of not having access or know what resources are available. So to address this, at the National Disability Institute, with the support of Wells Fargo, we've created the Financial Resilience Center. And the Financial Resilience Center assists people with disabilities to identify resources and address questions during this time. For example, it was talked about earlier about the economic impact payments, the stimulus payments. There was a lot of confusion within the disability community on who is eligible for those payments, right? So with the Financial Resilience Center, we were able to provide that information and work with other national partners to be able to address that and get relevant, timely information out to individuals with disabilities and their families. Similar to America Saves, as part of the Financial Resilience Center, NDI has partnered with our longtime friends at AFCPE to provide free financial counseling to people with disabilities. To learn more about the Financial Resilience Center, please go to our website. It'd be good if I showed my website. So the website is www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org. As we look at racial inequities, this has been an issue that the National Disability Institute has looked closer at over the years. Earlier this year, we published a new brief on race, ethnicity, and disability, and particularly the financial impact of systemic inequality and the intersectionality. And within this new brief, found that the groups with the highest poverty rates are Black and Indigenous individuals with disabilities. 36% compared to 23% of white individuals with a disability. The big piece that stands out from this brief is looking at the net worth based on race, ethnicity, and disability. The group with the lowest net worth is Black households, where the householder with the disabilities net worth is $1,282 compared to $27,140. I'm going to repeat that. The group with the lowest net worth is Black households, where the householder with the disabilities net worth is $1,282 compared to $27,000 for white householders with a disability. Across all races and ethnicities, the Black community individuals with a disability had the lowest net worth. You can download our reports and briefs by going to the National Disability Institute and clicking on our resources and reports. You know, we must do more to recognize and build the awareness that as we look at racial inequities, that we remember that people with disabilities is a part of all racial and ethnic communities, and programs should be made accessible to all. In the coming year, we'll be hosting additional listening sessions and identify solutions and work with others to put those solutions into action. As we're working through the pandemic and addressing racial inequities, we really are all in this together. And I appreciate that during the pandemic, how we as national organizations, local organizations, financial service providers, community-based organizations, we've really come together to support one another and share resources that can help the individuals that we serve. I want to thank America Saves for our partnership and your efforts to increase the awareness that savings is important for all, including people with disabilities. Thank you again for having me today.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate this panel, our partnerships with all of you, the really great work you're doing. To follow up on Michael's last comments, I want to just highlight that Michelle Singletary at the Washington Post put online today, it'll be in the paper tomorrow, and a good article about a research report we're issuing next week about the current state of financial conditions of Black families in the US. It is untenable, the discrepancies, and Michael, you clearly highlighted those. So thanks for your comments. Thank you, panel. And now I want to move on to our next section. I want to introduce my colleague, Amelia O'Rourke Owens, who's the Director of Youth Financial Capability at America Saves and part of the America Saves leadership team.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Imani Joseph. Imani just completed her first semester at Oberlin College, and last summer she participated in the Summer Youth Employment Program, One Summer Chicago. Imani, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. We've talked a lot today about the effects of coronavirus on the economy and savers. Could you share with us what it was like this past summer as a first-time worker for One Summer Chicago and how COVID impacted that experience for you?
I think it was a really hectic experience. I know for youth, when you are just going into the job market, it's already hard when you have no experience and you also come from an underprivileged community. And then adding on another layer of the coronavirus and everything being remote, it kind of changes your lens of view. Now you have to have a laptop, you have to have a quiet room to be able to work in, you have to have a microphone, all these things. And it changes the environment. Kids are going from like Zoom classes to Zoom work with no in between. And it's a lot. There's a lot of accessibility issues. And also, it's a lot of technology really quickly. The change was really abrupt, and we don't know if it's ever going to get back.
Thank you, Imani. Our initiative, America Saves for Young Workers, focuses on delivering financial capability to young workers in their jobs across the country. In 2020, we saw a decline in the number of youth who completed our program, largely because many programs were cut or greatly reduced the number of youth they could hire. So we're fortunate that Imani was able to go through this experience by living in a city that still implemented some programming. And we also at America Saves had the pleasure of hosting 8 interns all virtually. Imani was one of 5 on a team of young folks who interned with our America Saves for Young Workers program. One of the major projects, Imani, for your internship was the creation of the National Youth Advisory Council. Could you share with the audience what the America Saves National Youth Advisory Council is?
So the National Youth Advisory Council is a group of 16 to 24 students. It's set up in 2 tracks, the high school track and the post-high school track. And the goal of the National Youth Advisory Council is to create content for young people who are going into the job market and to teach our young peers about financial literacy. So it's young people facilitating and managing marketing and communication things to hopefully give to our peers to better educate them about financial literacy.
And what are some of the ways this council will address income equality and promote financial stability in this unstable time?
I think in one part, just because of the main goal of the council, it's to teach our peers financial literacy. But if you look at the people who consist in the council, I think that's when you're going to see a very diverse group of kids from different areas, from different financial backgrounds. And we were very intentional about the 2 tracks. We have a high school and a post-high school track. I think it was really important to make sure that after kids graduate, you could still qualify for the council, even if you weren't in a college or a university. You could be in all different types of like occupations and any type of financial standing and still be part of the council. And also, we hosted an informational town meeting and we gave people resume resources, interview tips. So, everyone, even if they already didn't have work experience or didn't have a community around them to help them make their resume, they could still be competitive and they also could still apply for the National Youth Advisory Council.
Thank you. And why do you think this council is so important right now?
I think, especially in the time of COVID, it's really important. Pre-COVID, the underbanked community, especially in Chicago, is majority people of color. They're already systematically oppressed, and then they're also economically oppressed, and they don't have the resources to get out of like financial debt. And then if you add COVID-19, you see that as you see a vulnerable population that is already underbanked, but also they are the predominant people that are getting COVID in this large city. So it's layers and layers of like inaccessibility to resources and harm. So I think the National Youth Advisory Council is trying to give people the tools to be like, to have self-determination and to get rid of all these systems of harm that are affecting them.
One difficult thing that we've observed are these disproportionate impacts that you've just mentioned. And thinking specifically about your peers and young adults, what does the impact of COVID-19 for you and your peers look and feel like?
Personally, for me, it's really chaotic and unstable. I didn't know I was going to college until 2 weeks before I was supposed to move in. And school is becoming virtual, but tuition isn't changing. Kids find out a week before they're supposed to move into their university that they have to pay $20,000 of room and board. So not only are they going into a new environment, they're going into a new environment within a pandemic. They're having online classes. Their tuition is not being decreased. And they also all of a sudden have to spend large amounts of money when school was uncertain. Even for high school students, they don't know about their college admissions process. They can't even take the SAT because of COVID. And I don't know if I'm going to school in 2 months. Everything is up in the air. It can change at the drop of a hat. And also, it's not even things can change. Things can change financially so fast. College is expensive. Like it's a mental toll to one be in school, another to be in a pandemic, and then also having to be in control of your financial situation and it changing so drastically with things that are out of your control.
Definitely, you are explaining uncertainty and inconsistency, which have been a theme today, that we're hearing you and many others are experiencing this year. So, Amani, for you personally, what does the future look like, and what will you be doing in the summer of 2021, for example?
Well, I'm not completely sure right now. It depends on if I'm going to school in the spring. If I don't go to school, I'm probably going to have to work a retail job. If I do go to school, maybe an internship. It all depends on what COVID looks like in a month. Will Chicago be shut down? Will I even be able to leave my house to work? All of these things are really uncertain and I can't control them. So it's really hard to like pinpoint on a specific job or to imagine what my summer is going to look like because I don't know what my next 2 months are going to look like.
Yeah, that's a very difficult scenario. And while it is one that many of us can empathize with, it certainly doesn't make it any easier. And it's a good reminder to the different ways that we're all experiencing this. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amani. It's easy for us to sometimes forget the individuals who are represented by the numbers that we so often cite. So thank you for sharing your employment experience with One Summer Chicago and America Saves with us today. In closing, thank you, Amani. We'll talk to you soon. In closing day one of our event, our summit this year is called Building Financial Stability in Unstable Times. Today, we've mostly explored that instability and the varied financial experiences of so many Americans. The pandemic's impact has been different across sectors and within communities. whether the military, people of color, Americans living with disabilities, youth, and of course, the intersection of these communities. As we've heard, these are important considerations for us to balance and consider while furthering savings and financial capability across the country. Clearly, the organizations and groups we heard from today are making significant efforts to improve the financial conditions of all Americans. Considerable efforts have been shared to address disproportionate impact within financial institutions, organizations, and the government. While some of the experiences and statistics shared today have, in all fairness, been very grim, we are ultimately tuned in here today rooted in optimism. We believe, as a collection of businesses, institutions, and nonprofits, that Americans can achieve financial stability. And tomorrow, we will focus on just that, building financial stability. Hear from different sectors how you can still promote automatic savings and piece together a roadmap. We will close day 2 of our summit with an invitation to share what opportunities you have for collaboration. Our first post-summit action will be to build that roadmap for our attendees with those opportunities that you share tomorrow. So please join us back here at 12 noon Eastern with resources, efforts, links, and calls for collaboration. You can share these in the chat and America Saves will collect and distribute them. We're in this together, even if socially distanced and usually virtual. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.